Good evening, class. Today we have a very special guest, a friend, an alpha male in both senses. He's an alpha guy, alpha phi omega man, and he's an alpha male. He is a friend. He's a colleague. He and I spent most of our undergraduate studies in this building. Mr. Edwards, Gregory Edwards, was history, and at the time I shared with you, I was history and political science, and having been involved in the community, which in the elections, which I encourage you to get involved with as I talk to you from day to day, I discovered that we would get a political science program. So I split and went straight poli-sci and ended up doing the political science major. But Mr. Edwards was one of the late Dr. Lewis Hollis's students, as well as I was, and he went on to law school. He did work in the legal field, and he worked in the DA's office as an assistant for a while. And then he saw an opportunity, and the people provided him with an opportunity to head that office. So he sought out to run for DA, and he did. And he was very successful, and he's since then had a re-election. And when are you up?
Well, I just got re-elected.
Yeah, it just happened, right? I knew it was. Yeah, he just got re-elected, so he's in for another 4 years. And I'd asked him to come in and speak to you because I wanted to, as I've done all semester, bring in people from the community who makes decisions in your lives. And while you're here at the university, what goes on in Albany, Dougherty County affects your life, not what's at home in your hometown, unless it's a family matter, but the politics at home doesn't have the kind of impact that the politics here will have on you. And the various governmental bodies, the criminal justice system, both city, county, and the school boards, they will all impact your lives. So with that, I asked him, and he so graciously accepted to come and speak to you. So why don't you join in with me and welcome our DA, Dougherty County District Attorney, Mr. Gregory Edwards.
Thank you, Henry. And just to give you all a little bit more of Greg Edwards, my background, I'm a graduate of Monroe High School, attended here at Albany State University. It was in Albany State College at that time. Right. And so attended here, and I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha.
Alpha Phi.
And sat right here like you guys are doing, attended the classes here. I majored in history with a minor in political science. Following my immediate graduation, I took a job teaching. I taught school for a year, and then I went on to law school and graduated from Mercer University School of Law in 1983. So I've been practicing law since 1983. As Henry mentioned, I worked in a number of areas in Albany in terms of my legal career. I began first with Georgia Legal Services, which is an organization that handles civil cases only for persons who are engaged in civil matters, divorces, bankruptcies, consumer lawsuits, that type of thing, bankruptcy. And so I did that for a few years. Then I went into private practice, pretty much doing what you call personal injury work, where you represent people who are involved in wrecks, medical malpractice, all of that type of thing. So I did that for a while. And then I joined the DA's office in 1990. And I had been an assistant DA until 2008, where I was elected the district attorney by the citizens of Dougherty County in the election. And I've had 2 subsequent terms. So I'm starting my 3rd term as the district attorney. And what I wanted to do is just give you an overview of what the district attorney's office or the role of the prosecutor is in government, as I guess is the subject of what you all have been working on in your class. And the first thing is that, of course, you all recognize that we have three branches of government. You got the legislative branch, you've got the executive branch, and you have the judicial branch. And I fall in the judicial branch, which includes judges and the court system as well. Now, the role of the prosecutor in the judicial system is fairly significant to this extent that as far as crimes, whatever the judges see is brought forward by the prosecutors. I mean, the prosecutors make the decisions about what judges will see in terms of crimes. But the role of the prosecutor in that regard is to seek the truth, to find out what happened, and to make sure that justice is served in this process. So my role is not so much to convict everybody that's charged with a crime, but my role is to find out what the truth is and do what is appropriate in relation to what the truth is, what the facts are, and make that type of decision. So again, seeking the truth, finding justice, and more recently, by reason of just the way our criminal justice has evolved, the district attorney, the prosecutors are now really more responsible for making sure that the rights of victims of crime are addressed. So that is now pretty much an additional role of prosecutors in making sure that the rights of victims are maintained, observed, and protected, just like persons who are charged with crimes. Their rights are protected and sustained by their representation. So that has become the evolving role of prosecutors in this state and the nation, for that matter. So those are the fundamental things that the prosecutor does. Now, for the Dougherty County District Attorney's Office, basically my role as the DA is to maintain all cases. That is from misdemeanor cases through to up to the death penalty case, if that's a necessary case that has to be dealt with. So the Dougherty County District Attorney's Office, I have 16 lawyers that work with me. I have about 6 investigators, and I have other support staff. So I have about 60 folks, including a victim advocates division. So I have about 60 folks that work in the district attorney's office in Dougherty County with various roles. We handle all of the felonies that are, warrants that are brought, and felonies are any case that a person could get up to 12 months or more in jail or prison, and a misdemeanor is anything that you could get 12 months or less in jail as a potential sentence. So those are the distinctions between felonies and misdemeanors. But in the Dougherty County Judicial Circuit, I am both the district attorney and the solicitor. In certain of other judicial circuits, there's an elected solicitor and an elected district attorney. The elected solicitor handles all of the misdemeanor cases that come out of that judicial circuit. But there are 5 such circuits in the state of Georgia where the DA is both the DA and the solicitor, and Dougherty County is one of them. So I handle all of the misdemeanor cases. On average, we may have average between 3,000 to 5,000 felony cases during the course of a year. And we may handle up from 18 to 20,000 misdemeanor cases during the course of a year. So that is kind of the numbers that we deal with here in Dougherty County. The other thing that the district attorney does is he serves as the advisor to the grand jury. And the grand jury is probably a process that many folks are not familiar with. Many folks know about the petit jury, the 12 persons or the 6 persons sit there and make a decision about whether somebody's guilty or innocent. But before that process begins, almost all felonies and certain of misdemeanors will go before a grand jury. And the grand jury consists of citizens as well, and the grand jury will decide, they screen what cases go forward in the judicial process. And the process is a secret process, and it stems from your old English common law. Back in the days of the Magna Carta, if you talked about that at some point during your discussions of in class. The Magna Carta was where the knight said, King John, you can't throw your enemies in the dungeon unless there's some reason for you to throw somebody in the dungeon. So we have brought our old common law process of the grand jury to America. And we still have that in Georgia. The grand jury will hear cases, and the citizens will decide whether or not the case is something that should move forward in the judicial process. And the DA is responsible for presenting cases to the grand jury and advising the grand jury about different situations. The other thing that the district attorney does as a general proposition is that we file civil forfeiture actions. In other words, if someone gets caught with monies or proceeds that come from illegal operations, it's my duty as well to file a civil lawsuit against that person and or the money or property and seize that if it's resulting from illegal operations, illegal gains, so that people do not profit from crime. So that's one of the things, again, that the district attorney does. He files civil actions against property and persons on behalf of the state if these properties are involved in any kind of criminal operations. Now, the general process, the way a case starts, is that there are two ways a case gets started. Well, both are based on warrants. Law enforcement can bring warrants where they come before the magistrate and say, we have probable cause to believe that, Mr. Smith did this or that. And any citizen, any one of you, if someone does something wrong to you, you have a right to go before a magistrate and swear out a warrant against that person for whatever the wrong is. And if the warrant is issued by the magistrate, then the next step is for it to come to the DA's office. And from that point, we take it through the process. In a nutshell, most of you all have learned the familiar process of how a case proceeds after a warrant. The next thing is that there's the arraignment of that person. At the arraignment, what is done is that the person is told, well, these are the charges against you that have been brought by the grand jury, and the charges are presented to you. At that time, you have the opportunity to say that you're guilty or not guilty. If you're saying you're not guilty, then the next step is the trial. At the trial, the next step is that a jury is selected, or if it's a bench trial, the judge will be prepared for the trial. And then it's the state's burden to present all of the evidence that is supposedly being brought in relation to that particular situation against the individual. So the state has the burden of proof. It is my duty and the prosecutor's duty to bring the evidence that supposedly goes toward whether the individual is guilty. And of course, you all are familiar with all the rights and privileges that every citizen enjoys. The right to remain silent, the right to not incriminate yourself, the right to have any accusers brought before you for examination. So all of those rights are affected, and all of those rights are presented during a trial of a case. Just in a nutshell, where the Dougherty County District Attorney fits into U.S. government, again, like I said, the prosecutors are part of the judicial branch. Of course, you have United States government, and there are federal courts that have been established by the Constitution. There's a United States Attorney General. There's also a United States Solicitor for certain of cases. And the state of Georgia has an Attorney General. And what happens is generally the Attorney General will represent the interests of the state in certain of cases that are brought, that are not necessarily all criminal cases, but some are criminal cases. And in instances where there's a conflict for, say, a local district attorney dealing with a case, the Attorney General can assign another prosecutor to come in and handle the case or handle such special cases as are required by the circumstances. Bringing it on down to local city and county governments, as I mentioned, Georgia is broken down into 49 judicial circuits. And the 49 judicial circuits each have their own DA, and sometimes they will have a solicitor as well. Some circuits have many counties. Dougherty County is just one big county. But we have, this judicial circuit. We have a superior court a state court, and a juvenile court. And my role is to represent the state in each of those courts. I prosecute juveniles who have been charged with crimes in Dougherty County as well. And a juvenile is any person between ages 6 and 16 who has been charged with a particular crime. And so I'm responsible for the juvenile court prosecutions as well. And I have prosecutors that do nothing but the juvenile court cases that come through. Once you're 17 and older, you become an adult as far as the Georgia criminal justice system, and then you will move forward in either state or superior court in that circumstance. So that's an overview of the criminal justice system in a nutshell, and probably the best way I can help y'all with our discussion is to try to field questions that anybody might have or that the instructor might want me to talk about.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Yes, I do internships, and quite frequently I have Albany State. Like I said, I'm an alumni, and I support as many intern opportunities as can be facilitated. Normally what it is that we want the intern to get some course credit for the work done, and we normally work it out with the person's instructor. But if we have room, and like I said, I get requests from interns for a lot of folks, so count on first available basis. And so, but I do in fact use interns to assist with different stuff. Question?
Hold on. Your name?
Turn it on.
No, it's good.
Okay, my name is Nia, and what is it called? The people that it start with an L. They defend. They're like closed cases, I guess. But the people that's like in prison and they're saying like, I don't know, they're innocent. What is it called? Legit. Y'all know what I'm talking about?
Well, your question is, who are the people that defend people who are in prison?
Right.
And there are different organizations that defend persons who have been convicted, and different public defenders are the persons that generally begin the defense process for folks who cannot afford their own attorneys. We have a public defender system here in the state of Georgia, and if you are filing what is called a habeas corpus action, and just what a habeas corpus action is if a person is convicted, they have a right to file that. And a habeas corpus action conceptually is like this. If you've seen a documentary that says like the making of Star Wars, the movie, how do you go about making have you seen those kind of documentaries? The making of Star Wars? All right, a habeas corpus action is kind of the making of the case against Mr. Jones and what is wrong with the making of the case. And they are attacking how the case is made through what is called the habeas corpus action. Was there something wrong about how the process went? Did the court apply the wrong law? Did the court have an improper instruction? Did the court, have some improper persons on the jury? Anything like that goes into the making of that verdict that individual says was wrong. And that's what a habeas corpus action is about. And some folks are specialists in habeas corpus type procedures.
So what are they called? Starts with an L. I know it. I was talking to my stepmom about it last week. A litigator, thank you.
Well, a litigator is anybody that represents anybody. Yes, litigation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, a litigator, litigation is courtroom argument or filing lawsuits. So, yes, that's what that's all about. Any other questions? Or?
No other questions?
Yes, sir.
Well, I was a correction officer back and I was wondering if y'all had internships there, like in that field.
I couldn't hear your first part.
I was a correction officer back at home.
Oh, okay, you were a correctional officer. Well, in my office, I have an investigative division, and what happens is some folks, and I get requests from the technical college who are people who are interested in law, in the correctional and law enforcement aspect of it. Some are interested in taking a paralegal type track in terms of their going into the criminal justice system, and some are interested in becoming lawyers and becoming prosecutors. And so I do have persons that intern in the correctional office / law enforcement track. So I have that as well. Probation officers? Yeah, I mean the same type of thing. Some people are interested in following that track in a criminal justice career. They want to be parole officers and probation officers. And really now they're trying, what's happening in Georgia now is that they're combining parole and probation, and it's not called community supervision. So it's effectively the same thing, but they call them community supervision officers because they're just saying that, probation and parole are all working for the same state and working with the same persons who are transitioning out of prison. So they call them, community supervision officers. So, but we do have, in my office at least, we can talk about that kind of track. Now, probation and parole themselves, I'm not sure whether they have internships, but I'm sure that they probably would. I would anticipate that they would. Yes, like I said, I mean, I have to, I can only accommodate so many folk.
Okay, I'm Nia again. And I was just wondering, what kind of jobs could you get with, like, your associates with criminal justice?
Well, I think, number one, you can certainly get a job in law enforcement. You probably can get a job in community supervision. You can get a job probably with, if you take a paralegal type track, there's plenty of opportunities. There's a growing need for, legal assistants and paralegals in many offices. So that's a very open career.
Okay, one more thing. So basically, I have my associates in criminal justice, but I wanted to be a lawyer, but I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I feel like, so now I'm getting my bachelor's in social work, and I'm trying to figure out how I can use the two, but I want to work with kids, like the at-risk youth. I don't really know exactly what I want to do. Like, I looked into like being a child care advocate or something, but I mean, I just don't know.
Well, in that regard, you're on the right track in terms of your background right now. All of those things are important. I have a lawyer joining my office now who she'll be starting Monday. Her prior experience had been as a legal child advocate, and there are lawyers that specialize in just that. So I mean, you still be a lawyer and do just that.
But I still have to go to law school.
But you still got to go to law school. Still got to go to law school. Still got to take the bar. Still got to do all that.
Right.
But certainly, there are opportunities with your background for that specific type of career.
Okay. Thank you.
When you graduated, what was your career?
Well, my career goal at the time was to go to law school. Like I said, I actually took a break. When I graduated, I said, well, you know what? I'm gonna take a break from academia for a little bit, and I said what I'd do is just chill or do something, something. And I wound up being a school teacher. I was looking for a job, and the best job that I could get immediately was I began work as just a substitute teacher, and the principal liked the way I was doing things, so he offered me a job with a provisional teaching certificate, which you could get at the time. So I wound up teaching school for a year at the middle school here in Dougherty County. Then I went on to law school, and pretty much that was kind of, I always was intending to go to law school, but you know, I guess I just did that.
Where did you work after law school? Is what I meant, like in.
Oh well, as I explained, my first job in Albany was working with Georgia Legal Services. Their offices are actually still over here, and that was my first job. And in that job, I represented poor people, people who could not afford to pay for a private attorney in certain types of cases. We'd only handle certain types of cases. We couldn't take cases that a lawyer could make money off, like a wreck or medical malpractice or something like that. So I did that work, and that was all types of civil work. We filed lawsuits against car dealers who were selling bad cars and that kind of thing. We did bankruptcies, we did divorces, we did custody actions, adoption actions. All manner of civil actions is what I did. So I did that for a number of years. And then I went into private practice. In private practice, I did the traditional personal injury type cases, you know, road wrecks, still did some bankruptcy work, did that type of work. And, you know, the type of work you see Ken Nugent, you know, one call, that's all, I was doing that for a little while. And so I did that, and then I joined the DA's office. And my first job in the DA's office was to represent victims of child offenses or child defendants in cases involving child molestation and rapes and all kinds of sexual assaults. That was my first job as a prosecutor, to prosecute those folks who engaged in that type of activity. So that's what I did initially, and just kind of went from there.
Hey, my name is Shmore, and I was gonna ask, I don't remember you saying this, but how long are you like district attorney?
How long have I been district attorney?
No, like how long like is your term?
Oh, my terms are 4 years. I have to be elected every 4 years. So I was elected in 2008, re-elected in 2012, and re-elected in 2016. So I'm starting my third term.
You know why I'm looking like that, right? Yeah, should have known that. Oh, you just took the test. Oh, okay. Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Hey, my name's Damon. I wanted to know, how old do you have to be a district attorney?
How old do you have to be? Well, it's not so much a matter of age to be a district attorney. Now it's a matter of how long you have practiced. So right now, you have to have, of course, been a member of the bar in good standing for at least 3 years before you can run for the elected position of district attorney. And for judges, you have to be a lawyer in good standing for at least 5 years. There's new legislation that may up that from 3 to 5 years. So you have to have practiced law at least 3 years before you can run for district attorney. And 5 years to run for judge. But they're gonna up it to 5 years, I think. That's what the legislation they've been talking about for district attorneys.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Edwards, given we're on a university campus, what kind of cases do you see coming from the university system?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. And what I had been doing at one point, and I haven't done it recently, and I've come to the campus because I'm an alumni, and I have I guess an orientation course that I call How Not to Be a Knucklehead 101. And what that is just some of the common things that I see college students in particular get in trouble with. And the common things that I see students get in trouble with, number one, they have to come to the realization that many of them come from different jurisdictions where you have to be 18 to be or older to be an adult, but in Georgia, if you're 16 and older, you're treated as an adult. So you're not a juvenile. You know, and many people are coming from different locations from around the country, but in Georgia, you're an adult if you're 17 years and older. And so they come in, some folks come in with the expectation that if they do something, they're going to be treated as a juvenile. That's the first general misconception that a lot of college students have about that. The other main things I see students getting in trouble with, now I'm seeing more drugs, and not little drugs, we're talking about big drugs. I'm talking about meth and talking about, you know, cocaine and that kind of thing. We've had some cases that are made by the Albany State School Police. So, you know, that's another thing that gets folks in trouble. Another thing that gets folks in trouble is identity theft. Unfortunately, a lot of college students succumb to what they believe is an opportunity to make some easy money by engaging in identity theft, taking somebody's information, buying stuff, getting, you know, property. Those are the three things that I see most commonly. Not so much shoplifting, that kind of thing. I don't see that as much. There used to be a time where I had a problem with a couple of Albany State students being involved with shoplifting, but that not so much that. The drugs, identity theft, and just kind of doing things with the expectation that you might be treated as a juvenile or but fortunately the situation has gone down. There was one case that was pretty egregious. Well, I take that back. The other thing that I see is just fighting, you know, students getting in fights for various reasons. You know, sometimes it's domestic in nature, boyfriend and girlfriends, somebody keys up somebody's car, that kind of thing, you know, and guys getting into fights about stuff, you know, but that's not that overwhelmingly a bad situation. But like I said, the troubling thing for me are the drug cases that I see, because again, the level of the drugs are pretty significant. And the identity theft thing is the thing that's also pretty significant. And unfortunately, a lot of folks get caught up with that. Too many folks get caught up with that because it seems like it's an easy, safe way to make a lot of money or get stuff. So in my orientation course, I tell folks, you know, don't do these things, and that's what I see.
Widespread on the news, on universities, campuses across this country, sexual assault cases where you see, you know, women are saying that they've been victims of sexual assault. And so what do you see in this jurisdiction, if anything?
What I've been seeing in that regard has been a mixed bag of all of that, and that's part of what I talk about in my talk. The crimes, the sex crimes that people get in trouble with, and fundamentally, it's in Georgia. The issue is consent. If there's a lack of consent, then you might have a problem with the allegation being rape or aggravated sodomy. Fundamentally, all of the things that are probably going on campuses are actually illegal. And one of the things is, it's actually illegal for unmarried persons to have sex. That's called fornication. But it's not prosecuted against consenting adults in Georgia. We do prosecute juveniles for fornication. Sodomy, again, is not prosecuted in Georgia for consenting adults. So that is not a crime that's prosecuted for consenting adults. It's just when there's lack of consent. And so the issue becomes, well, when is there a lack of consent? And it's always going to be largely sometimes a factual situation. And everything that is relevant to the circumstances is what's looked at. And the decision is made from that point about, number one, whether the case is going to be prosecuted. Number two, the evidence that's presented. And, you know, it kind of goes from there. Each case on a case-by-case basis. And the other big thing is that also alcohol for persons under 21 is a crime in Georgia. So I know a lot of college students drink, and one of my personal efforts is to address teen drinking. And the reason for that is actually twofold in this community. What I have learned is that in Dougherty County we have a high instance of teen pregnancy. What's that all about? Well, teens getting pregnant. A lot of times young girls get involved in situations and they're drinking. And actually, alcohol is like really the gateway drug from my perspective. It's the first drug just about everybody. Somebody's been handed a wine or a beer or a shot of liquor sometime. It's sometime before, you reach adulthood as a child. And just about everybody has come to some experience with alcohol, and that's usually the first thing that people get involved with. And teenage girls, if they are under the influence of alcohol, they may be more inclined to do things that they may not otherwise do. Now, the important thing about that is this, and studies have shown that if a girl is drinking in the early stages of pregnancy, that will affect the child. And if a child is, if a girl is pregnant, teen particularly, and drinks, that child is going to grow up with some issues that may have been caused by the teens drinking at that time. And they may not know that they are drinking or should be drinking because it's a grown thing to do. But, certainly studies have shown that is causing maybe some of the issues of violence that we experience now for those children who have been born of teen mothers now or adults, and that exposure to alcohol as an embryo, probably unwittingly, is causing these, behaviors and things. And again, as a society, we have to address that. So my thing is, I want to say for teens in general not to drink, and I've given talks here and at other locations about the need to address teen alcoholism, because teen drinking is the first drug that you get, and it causes issues perhaps that are affecting society in general. Just getting back to the sexual offenses in general, again, we try to look at all of these issues and make decisions based on the facts.
All right, what about the females who call rape? Like,
What now?
the females who call rape, like they go and they're embarrassed that they did something, so they end up calling rape.
Right.
What about that?
Now, it is a crime to falsely report a crime. That's true. And so, again, I told you my job as the prosecutor is to find the truth. So just because, of course, a person says rape, the first thing that we must do is look at the facts surrounding the circumstance and evaluating that. And it is a crime to falsely report a crime or make false statements. And that's part of all of our review of rape cases. But ultimately, it is up for a jury, generally, to decide the credibility of the witnesses. Under law, the credibility of any one witness can establish a fact. So if a jury hears that evidence from the witness and the jury decides that person is credible and believable, a jury can find whatever the issue is. So it's an issue of credibility. And we look to the evidence in addition to, the statement. We need corroboration. We look for corroboration. Corroboration can be any other evidence, physical evidence, anything that goes into what the whole story is about. If that makes sense.
Okay. So before you were the DA, you, like when you were doing your other practices and stuff, you were defending people, right?
I've done that. I've defended. I've done criminal defense work. Yes.
Right. Okay. So my question is, how often did you find yourself like having to defend?
That person that I knew was guilty, or believed was guilty. All right. Well, that's a good question. And
basically you have to do it, right? Because it's
yes,
your
I mean,
job.
and here's the thing about that. And as a lawyer, as a professional, you have sworn to do your duty in any circumstance where you're called to represent your client. So you are representing your client's best interest. Regardless of what he or she may have done, your duty is to protect their rights. And your duty is also to be an objective, detached observer and tell them, okay, this is the evidence here, and this may be what is being offered, and this is what your chances might be if you go to trial. If you do that, and you make sure that for instance, if I'm defending, I would make sure that the prosecutor is making sure all of the appropriate T's are crossed and I's dotted, and all of my client's rights are protected. I've done that as a defense attorney. You know, I've defended folks, I've gone to trial, defended them, I've done all of that. So, and as an individual, like I said, your first duty is your oath to make sure that you give your best defense to and represent the rights of your client. And as long as you do that, it doesn't matter. And if you have a problem with that, then you should move from your representation of that individual. Now, there are some folks who they know that they cannot represent people who are accused of child molestation. They cannot represent people who are accused of murder or whatever. So they should not undertake that representation if that is going to be an issue. But as a general proposition, you can do these things and not have an issue if you do your job as, you know, an objective, sworn professional doing what is required by your oath and required by the law, and making sure all things are what they're supposed to be.
So my question is, so basically you have the right to just say, no, I don't want to take this case. I was under the impression when you working in the firm or whatever case is given to you, you got to take it.
Well, at some level, if you were, for instance, in private practice, you were your own boss.
That take time to be your own boss, though.
But what I'm saying, if you're your own boss and a client walks in and says, I want you to represent me, if you accept their case, then you accept their case, and then you're in it. But if they present what they have and what the charges are, then you can decline. You know, you're not forced unless if you engage the case, then it is your case. Now, with me as the prosecutor, I don't get a chance to choose who are charged with crimes. You know, when they get charged with crimes, my issue is to look at what's going on and make a decision about what to do with the case as it's been presented. Now, for public defenders and people who are, you know, who are government lawyers, if the client qualifies financially and is otherwise not, you know, then they may have to be in that posture where, again, they must take the case. They don't get a chance to choose to that extent. But for any individual that's, you know, just acting on their own, or any firm acting on its own, they have the choice to represent someone or not. But for me, like I said, as prosecutor, I got to look at everything. For public defenders who have been assigned or received cases where there's qualifications, now there's some cases that are disqualified for public defenders because of different issues, but for the most part, they have to defend the folks that they have to deal with. So that's kind of what's going on for us. But as long as, and for me personally, professionally, my philosophy has been, you know, I will do the best job I can within the bounds of the law and maintain my professional detachment and really, you know, advise the client with professional detachment. You know, this is the evidence. this is what's going on, these are your rights, and as much as possible you follow their instructions. You advise them about what will happen possibly, but your obligation is to try to, as much as you can, follow their wishes about how they want to proceed in the case.
Mr. Edwards, you touched on a couple of nuggets in that. One being the attorney-client privilege, and second, in your opening, prior to getting into your presentation, you talked about certain rights, and what I'm hearing, and you spoke to that attorney-client privilege, but also you spoke to the right to an attorney. Yeah, and I think the questions were, he touched upon that, and I just wanted to make sure that we picked up on that.
Yeah, under law, you have a right to an attorney if you qualify, and for certain of cases. And if you can't afford an attorney, the law will appoint an attorney to represent you. And in Georgia, we have a public defender, and the public defender will be appointed to represent those folks who cannot afford an attorney. And that's in criminal cases.
Here's one final question, unless one of the students have one. All right, I'm a student. I'm an upperclassman now. I'm a junior. I got my own crib out into the community. So I throw a party. But I go out and I purchase all the liquor. And some of the kids from campus come. But among the kids are teenagers. So my house get raided. Or one of the kids leave and do something stupid, and you discover that they're teenagers. Are there anything that could be done to me?
Got two things going on. On the criminal side, like I told you all, under Georgia law, generally as a general proposition, persons under 21 are not allowed to consume alcohol. Now, there are many exceptions to that. Some of the exceptions to consuming alcohol is that you, as a person under 21, you can consume alcohol in your own parents' home under their supervision. You can consume alcohol. Now, this has to be your parents now. We're not talking about your uncle or your cousin. It'll be your cousin. Got to be your parents. You can consume alcohol if you are in a religious rite. Some at some of the religious services, Last Supper and other type religious services of the various religions, the communion will have real wine. And so that's okay if that's taken in that context, even if you're a child. And so those two general contexts. Now, to your party scenario, you're just a student and you're on, even if you're over 21 and you're furnishing alcohol to minors, that's the charge you could catch, so to speak. Furnishing alcohol to a minor, which is a misdemeanor. Now, on the civil side, we have what are called dram shop laws. And that is if you are in a bar or some other place that serves alcohol for consumption, even on the premises, particularly if it's for the consumption on the premises, and that person is given alcohol and they go out and have a wreck, yes, you can possibly be civilly liable. That is, your money could be sued. You could be sued and your money taken as a result of being involved in a dram shop lawsuit. And I warn fraternities in particular about those kind of things. Frat parties do not serve alcohol at your frat parties or your sorority parties, because again, if someone gets drunk and drives off, they're going to turn around and sue your fraternity or your sorority under the dram shop laws. So that is one thing that could possibly happen in your scenario as you just described. So yes, you could be potentially civilly liable if someone goes off and drinks and has a wreck or some other personal injury. Okay.
Any other questions? Well, we certainly want to thank Mr. Edwards for taking time out of his busy schedule to come and present to you an overview of the criminal justice system from the DA's and the solicitor's perspective. And we also injected questions that is important to you as students here, whether you're riding in the car with somebody doing something illegal, or whether you're at a frat party or a sorority party, and things are going on there, and you're consuming alcohol and you're underage.
If I may, that's an important point also relating to issues for college students, and that's being what we call a party to a crime. And any party to a crime is anyone who participates, aids, abets, consents to, participates in any type of crime. So a lot of times that's the thing that gets college students caught up. You may have a friend that's doing something and you may inadvertently be caught up in it as a participant. And if the evidence shows that you were party, consented to, agreed to, it may be, your person that goes and shoplifts the purse. But if you're there and you're acting as a lookout, and you say, well, I didn't take anything, but if the evidence shows that you're assisting, aiding, and abetting, you get caught up in what's being called a party to a crime, so you get charged too. So that's a concept, again, that a lot of folks need to just be aware of. Don't stand around if you see somebody getting into something. Don't stand around because you don't want to be inadvertently brought up on a charge that you just had nothing to do with. And that happens, unfortunately. And see, that's what my job is. My job is to try to sort through those kind of things. But what I say to everybody is just avoid circumstances where somebody's up to something that can get you potentially in trouble. Protect yourself from activities of folk. And that's the other thing about, like I said, don't listen to your peers. Don't listen to college students about what the law is. All right? That's another thing. Don't do that. Because again, that's another way folks get caught up. Listening to what their peers are saying about certain legal issues. So, fundamentally right from wrong. You know what's right and you know what's wrong. Just don't get caught up.
One final question that you was talking because I see so much of it on campuses, not necessarily here, but it's in the news all the time on university. Bullying, especially when it comes to, preferences, whether it's female or sexual preferences, bullying. Is that serious?
Well, bullying on college campuses primarily is found in hazing issues that go on with the fraternities and sororities. That's kind of a aspect of bullying, hazing, and there are specific laws that deal with hazing on campuses to protect persons who are trying to join the organizations. So that again, there's specific laws in Georgia. I can give you a whole lecture on that. But as a fundamental issue, that's where I see bullying aspects going on in college. When we see issues with hazing with the sororities and fraternities, and even football teams, athletic teams. That's kind of a hazing and bullying are kind of synonymous on the college campus.
I'm a ball player. I'm in the locker room, and some of the fellas that have been on the team for a while, think my preference, my sexual preference might not be identical to theirs, and they do little things to me.
That's potentially hazing. That's potentially hazing and / bullying. And there's specific Georgia laws that address hazing that, would be applicable even in any collegiate activity or any school activity. So that includes band, athletic teams, fraternities, sororities, beta club, whatever club, history, political science club, they're harassing you that. If that's hazing going on in that circumstance, that can be addressed by the laws of Georgia.
All right, class. Join me and let's give Mr. Edwards a. No, you gotta take a photo, man. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you very much. I think what he's presented to us is a good overview of his role, the office, giving you some insight on how you can pursue certain careers in the criminal justice system. And he's also presented you with some scenarios that, as college students, you might want to avoid. It will certainly help you if you avoid those situations. When you leave here and you go teaching school for a year, and then you want to move on, well, you won't be able to teach school if you get hung up here and get the wrong thing, wrong charges against you here. That's going to impact your entire future. And, you know, some overcome it, but most of them don't. So, if you will, come on down. Mr. Edwards, will you come center? And come on, let me get